an heirloom that we're trying to save. The actual wood can be refinished and dried out, but any of the upholstery associated with it has to be removed. Most of our appliances today can have motors, and motors need to be reconditioned before we can use them. They need to be reconditioned by a professional because that water will contain mud and other contaminants that might get into that motor and cause an electrical short in the motor, an electrical hazard. The same thing with most of our appliances today have electronics, and any debris that might be in that circuit board will cause a short circuit. So as we look at our various appliances that we have in the home, many times we're going to need to discard them rather than try to salvage them if they were in the actual flood water. If they're not in the flood water, we can clean them and they're fine. But if they were in the flood water, typically it may not be economical to go through that cleanup process that is required. With the heating and ventilation air conditioning system, we're really looking at two different parts. Again, our furnace air conditioner unit has a lot of, again, motors and electronics, and with that, again, have a service technician evaluate it and determine really is it worth trying to clean and salvage, or should I just discard it? When we're looking at the ductwork, theoretically with metal ducts we could have professionals come in and do a cleaning, but remember that we have all of the joints and connections that would need to be thoroughly cleaned, and you really need to weigh whether it's going to be economical to do that or not. It might be cheaper just to replace the ductwork. If we're looking at the newer flexible duct, generally that's going to need to be replaced. And we need to make sure that any cleaning agents, any that are used in our ventilation system, are approved to be used in the ventilation system, because that's where the air will be traveling all the time that we're breathing, and we need to make sure that we're using products that are approved for that application. We look at some specific items. Plaster and stucco in our structure are concrete and are fairly resistant to contamination, and so we can actually salvage those as long as we're able to open the wall cavity, remove any insulation, and dry out that wall cavity, address any mold issues that might be within the wall cavity. But the plaster and stucco we can salvage. Cabinets and countertops, we really need to look at what the material is that was used. Frequently that they will disintegrate in that wet, flooded environment. The non-porous tubs, toilets, sinks, we can clean and salvage. The plumbing associated with it typically is going to be sealed, but we may want to do a chlorine flushing through the plumbing system just to make sure that has been cleaned as well. Wood flooring, the actual wood flooring, we can do the cleanup on that wood flooring and salvage it. Windows and doors, again, it'll depend on individual situations what we're looking at. The OSB or particle board, OSB is oriented strand board and particle board plywood. It'll depend on how long that they've been in the water, and we really can't make a general statement. You'll need to look and see if the structural integrity is still there, whether they have delaminated and come apart. Typically the particle board will disintegrate when it's wet, but the OSB and plywood probably we can salvage and can be cleaned. This is the sequence that they typically recommend for actually going in and cleaning and removing the structural members that need to be removed from a flooded home. Take out the cabinets and doors first, because frequently, even if we can save the cabinet, we need to remove the wall board and things that were behind it. Remove the trim that is in the house, pull down any ceiling materials that need to be removed, and then we start looking at the wall. The drywall, sheetrock, generally will need to be removed. Again, we're looking at it both from a mold standpoint as well as a flooded water standpoint. If it's strictly flood water, typically the water will wick up about 2 feet above wherever the water level was, but you really need to examine closely what that wall board looks like. The insulation will need to be removed. Paneling typically needs to be removed because it will become misformed or warped when it's wet. And as part of that clean out process, we need to be removing the fasteners as well, because they'll need to be removed before we do any rebuilding. Once we have everything removed, then we will be looking at sweeping down the surfaces before we get into the cleaning process. So that brings us to the end of the first part of looking at the actual flood cleanup process, and then we'll step in the next section and talk about the rest of the flood cleanup process, the washing that needs to be done, the sanitizing, and then in the last section we'll look at building dry out.